What's up, everybody? Today we were going to have a guest on that it seems to we had a bit of a scheduling conflict, so instead we decided to talk some other sports. So today I'm joined by my co-host Lacedric Green, also known as Said Sells Homes on Instagram and Twitter as well, right?
Yep, everywhere.
Definitely. So yeah, like I said, we're kind of just going to touch on all kinds of different sports news. So what did we want to start with? I know there's a lot of NFL news with coaching changes currently.
hmm
Is there anything in
Um, I guess we could start with the coaching changes. I'll go there because it does hit close to home. With the Broncos hiring Sean Payton, I didn't see that coming, and I wish I'd have put something out saying I didn't see that coming because I was telling people like we're not hiring Sean Payton. Um, you know, I feel like I don't know. He retired for a reason, and once you retire, like you kind of chill, maybe get that itch you want to go back, you kind of miss it, but you're not all the way in when you go back, what's up. So we'll see. Hopefully it goes good. We essentially traded away um, you know, 3 first round picks, 3 second round, well, like all our first 3 picks for like, the next 2 years for Sean Payton and Russell Wilson. So hopefully it works out. That's a big one. They're hoping to keep Ijiro Avero around, but it looks like he's still interviewing. He's still interviewing for the Cardinals position and I think the Colts job as well. But I don't, think he'll get those. We'll see. There's not really any defensive coordinator positions available around the league, but I'm pretty sure the Broncos are going to be interviewing DC candidates as well. So we'll probably be getting a new DC over here, which is cool. Maybe it's time for an entirely new regime. If they're going to revamp, we might as well revamp it. We know we have the key pieces. Uh, Other than that, around the league, I haven't really been following the other coaching searches too much or too deeply. Is there another big one you can think of?
my curiosity is with that Arizona spot. I mean, obviously, depending on who they end up picking, it's very tied to what Kyler Murray wants. I mean, you got to keep that guy happy if you're going to have any sort of success in Arizona. He's signed long term. He got that big contract last off season. So currently, it sounds like they're interviewing Mike Kafka, the Giants' offensive coordinator, which should be very interesting. I like that fit. Kafka is a former quarterback himself. Like I was just telling you off camera, former Eagles quarterback, actually, long-term backup. So he never really did much in the league, but he's a guy who, he was around of a lot of great offensive minds, including most recently Brian Dable with the Giants. So that would be an interesting fit. In terms of the Denver hiring, I personally like the move. And to get Sean Payton, to me, this is just on brand with what Denver's done the past couple of years. They're very all in on the present day. They know that Broncos fans are not going to wait around for them to be good. It's been many years since we've had success, basically since Peyton Manning left. So
Mm-hmm.
they kind of sold the farm last year to get Russell Wilson here. I personally didn't think they were going to get Sean Payton either because of what it was going to cost draft pick wise. However, they ended up getting creative and making it work. So I like the move to bring him in because, like I said, again, it shows that they're very all in. They want to succeed this season. But at the same time, I'm very concerned about the future of the team, given the fact that, like you said, we don't have any draft picks over the first basically 3 rounds for the next 2 seasons. I know we
Mm-hmm.
have one third-round pick this season, but really, third round at that point, you're talking about a mid-tier starter, a guy who most likely needs some development, not a immediate impact type guy.
Which could work. I feel like we do have the pieces to kind of make a run, at anything. So, developmental players could work, build them up, but it's just really like I don't know. It's just kind of like, yeah, what are we doing here though? Like you said, they haven't been good since Peyton Manning for the most part, and before Payton, how long was it? Since John Elway, and it's just kind of you kind of got to get out of that loop of just trying to depend on the now just to get the now, and get that some sort of consistency back into it. Like build up for the future as well, not just the now. And now it just feels like they are just worried about the now because they're trying so hard to save face from what's happened in the near past.
I agree. I agree. And actually, it's kind of interesting if you really look at the timeline of everything, the way things went. Because, at first it was a situation where we saw that Nathaniel Hackett was hired, right? And everybody started connecting dots. Well, he's the Green Bay Packers offensive coordinator. So maybe Aaron Rodgers is coming to Denver. I did the same thing. Everybody did the same thing. Let's be quite honest. They're already doing the same thing in New York with the Jets, where he ended up as the offensive coordinator.
Yep.
So to then see how it all shook out, that Aaron Rodgers ended up signing an extension, that Devontae Adams, the one who ended up getting traded, and then the Broncos ended up landing Russell Wilson. To say that kind of came out of left field and was an odd fit is kind of an understatement, to say the least, because I don't think any of us saw that coming specifically. And then we end up in this season where they hire Sean Payton. And like you said, I think this to a certain extent is them trying to save face. But at the same time, the fit with Russell Wilson does make a lot of sense here. Sean Payton has shown that he likes mobile quarterbacks, which I know there's been a lot of talk about Russell's feet, but he can still move a pocket when he needs to. And then on top of that, the fact that he hasn't shied away from shorter quarterbacks. So Drew Brees was never a tall guy, found a lot of success with Drew Brees in New Orleans. So I definitely expect him to be able to design an offense around Russell Wilson's strengths. And it'll be very interesting to see exactly how everything works out for Peyton and Wilson this season for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, that's all we really have to go off of, is Drew Brees. I mean, Taysom Hill, he had a decent, 5-game win stretch with Taysom Hill or something like that. But I mean, really, what else is there? I mean, he was in the NFC South. They weren't exactly, there wasn't exactly like top play quarterback competition down there. He's playing against Matty Ice and Cam Newton, which are great guys in their own rights. I mean, both of them won MVPs, I'm pretty sure. And Jameis Winston, but at the same time, like what the Saints were making it maybe to the second round, maybe, you weren't seeing them in the divisional championship games until they made it to the Super Bowl. And then I think you saw them maybe once more after that. Not even. I don't think they even went back after that. So I mean, it is, and it's totally understandable. I mean, the Broncos do need a CEO. They need someone who not only understands what's going on, but knows what they're going to do to fix it as well and how they're going to fix it. So he does bring in all of that experience for sure. I just want to see how it plays out on paper too. Because I mean, we look good the last few games, but it was the last few games. Everybody looked good.
That's fair for sure. So my next question on this list would definitely be, where does Aaron Rodgers land for 2023?
We got a comment. Yeah, I was gonna say
Michael Washington, another member of Shady Sports Network. Hop on here, Michael. Denver's biggest problem is the offensive line with no draft capital, and it's going to be tough with cap space issues to tackle through free agency. The coach doesn't matter if the O-line is subpar.
Yeah,
it's hard to argue with that.
That's very, very true. I mean, Garrett Bowles is our leading guy. He's been crushing it, but at the same time, it just feels like they paid no attention to the offensive line. It's just been plug and play with subpar players, like mid-level players. Well, when they try to hit a big player, they seems like they go after him after the player's been hurt, not even just in the offense, but on the defense too. I don't think cap space will be that much of an issue. Like, if it's anything, the owners know it's numbers, so I'm sure they have a team, a squad of numbers people just ready, to figure out those issues. I think it'll be more so people wanting to come to Denver or even, finding offensive line. I mean, it's offensive linemen. Usually when a team gets decent offensive linemen, they try to hold on to them for sure. So definitely without the draft capital, it's really just gonna our scouts, man. That's what it comes down to. I feel like is the Denver scouts. So they better put together a phenomenal scout team and just find any player from anywhere. Check out Shady Sports Network. So they can check out XFL, USFL players that they may need to bring in. They can potentially bring in and build up to be that guy. And replace some of those draft picks they've lost. Because I mean, what else does it come down to? Like that's big, the first 3 rounds that makes up your team. Like you don't have a whole team full of Brock Purdy's going to the playoffs. You know what I mean? Like nothing against Brock Purdy, but like your 4th through 7th round players. Those are the guys that are coming in and holding it down when they need to, but you really got to have those foundational players first, to even give those other guys time to develop. So hopefully they can, look at that and actually focus in on it instead of just trying to plug and play. Hopefully we're not trading away our 4th and 5th round pick for some like 36-year-old tackle,
Well, it depends on who that tackle is, I guess. But yeah, I completely understand because, I mean, one of the things that I do like that Denver's done is they have addressed the offensive line in the draft, but it seems like they double tapped multiple different positions, and a lot of these guys didn't really pan out like they had hoped. We're talking about like Quinn Miners. I personally think he's done okay, but Dalton Reisner is pending free agent. He was a former 2nd round pick. They're talking about letting him go. Another guy that has kind of underwhelmed has been Lloyd Cushenberry at center, another 3rd round pick that they haven't really liked. Or, let's talk about, I think it was Jawan James a couple years ago that they brought in at right tackle that was just a complete bust as a free agent pickup, So yeah, the offensive line has definitely held back Denver. And I think that's a big part of the reason why Russell Wilson found little to no success last season. But
yeah.
It'll be interesting. Like I said, Sean Payton's an offensive coach. He knows what he needs to make his offensive work. And he was a guy who has never in New Orleans shied away from drafting or picking up offensive line help. So, I mean, he always had a top 5 unit or top 10 unit. And I definitely expect him to bring that mentality to Denver as well.
But I mean, at the same time, too, though, we can't have Russ playing like he's playing Madden. Like, you can't just be looking for the deep ball, when you haven't even completed more than 5 passes. He has to take what he's given, but they're not going to give him the deep ball. He's a number 1 deep ball, passer 2 years ago. So, of course, they weren't going to give him the deep ball. And the whole saying was, let Russ cook, and that's what he tried to do. So, hopefully, Sean Payton can temper that down too. And just really get the scheme right. Because scheme wise, I mean, you can get a couple of plug and play pieces. I would hope that Russ is, talented or skilled or, I would hope that he knows what he's doing enough to be able to, get the ball out of there. That was the thing that Peyton Manning did. That was cool. Like he knew he couldn't, hold up. And he knew our line was crap. So what he do, get the ball out faster. You call plays to get it going. Like we have the guys that do it, Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick, sure-handed, not to get stuck on the Broncos. We can get other stuff too, but
Absolutely.
I need to get set talks going because this is the kind of stuff I need to, I guess, just go on about.
No, you're cool, man. Like honestly, that Denver Broncos entire situation is so interesting. I mean, if you look at it from an outsider's perspective, they've changed owners, quarterback, and head coach in a matter of one season. 1 calendar year. All of this has changed. So it's kind of interesting to look at them as a team. But so we do have a question here. Where do we think Jimmy G will land? So
probably the Jets after they don't get Aaron Rodgers.
That's exactly where I think he's going to be. I actually wrote an article about this recently, and some of the connections I made have changed. Like Mike LaFleur is no longer there. He was the offensive coordinator at one point, or passing game coordinator for the 49ers. But there's still 49ers ties. He knows Robert Saleh from his time in San Francisco, so I think he's going to the Jets one way or another. Although, like you said, Aaron Rodgers is probably a target on their list as well.
Yeah, but I don't think Aaron Rodgers is drama queen, man. He's just building it up, keep you talking about him, and then he's just gonna play for Green Bay.
It looks like Inside the Lines agrees with you. I'm not a Rodgers fan since he's acting like a crybaby.
Yeah, just tell us what. Just if you're gonna tell us what you're gonna do, just tell us. Like if you're not gonna tell us, then don't tell us. Other than that, no one cares.
Maybe Tampa.
Tampa, ooh, that would be funny to see him follow Tom Brady again.
Yeah, that would be ironic. That would
Yeah,
be a good move. I do like that move a lot for Tampa. The thing is, this season with Tom Brady retiring, Jimmy Garoppolo becomes a very interesting candidate for where he's going to land.
Derek Carr
Another one.
too.
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron Rodgers is another one
Yeah.
that I'm very interested to see where he's going to land. Derek Carr. There's a bunch of different names that are veterans that aren't necessarily free agents that might be on the trade market that make this offseason incredibly interesting.
Yeah, I mean, what is San Francisco gonna do?
Yeah, exactly. San Francisco, all three of their quarterbacks are very interesting. Obviously, we saw Brock Purdy play, we saw Jimmy G play, and we also watched Trey Lance play early on. I personally am still in the camp that Trey Lance gets the opportunity to start at some point. Brock Purdy's now injured, so now the 49ers get basically an easy way out to give Lance the opportunity to prove them wrong. You know, if their current evaluation of him is true and they don't think he can hack it, then yeah, Purdy ultimately probably steps back in that starting job. But I'm of the camp that thinks Purdy is a little bit more than a game manager. I don't think he's anything exciting.
What do you think? You think Purdy's first game as a starter for the 49ers compared to Trey Lance's first game, which I'm sure everyone remembers, you know, that sludge fest.
Yeah, so obviously Trey Lance came out and he looked like dog crap. Let's be quite honest. I mean, honestly, I don't think that anybody expected that performance from him in this 49ers offense because everybody talks about how it's quarterback proof. It doesn't matter who you plug back there, we'll win, right? That's what we always hear from San Francisco. So I thought that it was going to be very exciting with Trey Lance. What ended up happening, in my assessment, is the fact that they altered their play calling so much to cater to Trey Lance's game that it was no longer Shanahan's offense. They were asking Trey Lance to do too much with his feet rather than allowing him to escape the pocket when it came time. I think in this particular case, you need to approach your offense exactly identical to how you would with Brock Purdy or Jimmy Garoppolo back there. You don't alter the play calling because Trey Lance is an athlete. You allow him to be an athlete when the time calls for it and a quarterback first. You know, we know he's very raw, so a lot of times he's going to relay back to that athleticism when, you know, going gets tough anyway. So in my mind, you didn't need to scheme things up like that. You needed to focus on how to get him in a rhythm as a passer and not necessarily try and give him 7 to 10 carries a game every game, because that simply wasn't the Shanahan offense prior to that.
Yeah, man. And I feel like that's the thing that New York did better than anyone else this season. Well, they schemed to their players as well as to their scheme. You know, Brian Dow over there, you know, you didn't have Danny Dimes throwing, you know, 40, 50 times a game. You know, you had their running game going. You had kind of his boot keep going. You know, you kind of had things that he did, his strong points going. That's what it comes down to from a head coach in the NFL. I feel like, you know, like I'm no expert on it, but I feel like at that point in time in a player's career, they don't need someone to they don't need someone to show them, you know what I'm saying, how to play the game. They're professional. They need someone to put them in the best position to succeed with their skill set. And
Exactly.
you know, like they picked Trey Lance for a reason. There's a reason this dude played what, 2 seasons in college? One
Yeah.
season? He barely played. He has less experience than some high school players, you know what I mean? And he's in the NFL, and we know how many people make it to the NFL. So there's a reason he's there. It's just like you said, man, and it's Shanahan. That's what's surprising about it too. Like I feel like they're gonna run it back with him, and he's gonna have this whole past year to understand, what he started out with, how it went in them as well. So I think it's San Fran, man. They're deadly every other year.
Yeah, and they're going to be good next year too. It doesn't matter if it's Trey Lance or if it's Brock Purdy, quite honestly. I think this offense is, to a certain extent, very, very quarterback proof. I do think that ultimately they'll get it right. They had a very small sample size with Lance before he got hurt. We don't know what he was ultimately going to be for the season. But I do want to say that if I'm if I'm Kyle Shanahan and I'm looking at my offense for 2023. I'm going back to some John Elway film, some Jake Plummer film. I want to see what my father was doing with guys like this that were more mobile, that were still passing quarterbacks, but guys who could escape the pocket, you could move the pocket with. It's things like this that you need to focus on, because your dad, Mike Shanahan, is a legend. He won 2 Super Bowls with a very mobile quarterback who was pass first at that point in his career because of his age. So you don't necessarily need to have him carry a team with his feet all the time.
And I mean, honestly, you don't even have to look so far back. Look at, the NFC team in the Super Bowl. Look at what they did with their quarterback. I mean, Jalen Hurts is definitely a mobile quarterback. He proved that beyond a doubt, but I didn't see him as a mobile quarterback, more or less coming in, into last season, I'd say. But look at how they've done with him. I mean, although their running game could be a bit better for sure, but he doesn't have to look too far. Just look outside. And I mean, not even, I don't know, like, you're right. I mean, it's just really just going to take him sitting down and being like, okay, like, well, how am I going to handle this without overthinking this too much and not putting too much on his plate? Because that's what they have to really find out, is how much they can even put on his plate, like, to see whether they have, either a Kyler Murray or Jalen Hurts in their hand. I mean, quite honestly, just to put it in, like, what I feel is relevant.
Absolutely. So East Coast Locker Room Live, apparently he rebranded. It was most recently CT Locker Room Live. So love the new name, by the way. But he says, let's talk about Josh Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
And basically playing on every team in the league. So I believe that was his 14th or 15th NFL team. He's played in multiple different leagues. I think he was a member of the UFL. He was a member of the AAF, I believe, at one point. XFL 2020 as well, and then he's back with the NFL. Actually, one of the few players from the XFL in 2020 that stuck with the NFL at that quarterback position, talking about Taylor Heineke and PJ Walker as well. I personally would like to say that I think Josh Johnson's a lot more capable than people give him credit for. If you looked at how he played in 2021 when he split time with the Jets and the Ravens, both of those situations he passed for over 300 yards. He had a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, and he completed like 67% of his passes. So he is one of those quarterbacks that I think is simply too experienced to not have as a practice squad / emergency type quarterback in that situation. No, he has not been tremendously NFL successful, but at the same time, he's got a lot of playing time. He's got a lot of experience. So I personally think that Josh Johnson's a great quarterback. I don't think there's ever going to be an MTV Cribs edition for Sam Shady. Sorry, buddy. I know you're really hip on what's going on behind the scenes here, but there isn't much.
It's a great setup, though.
It's all right. It's all right.
I
can't complain. Yeah, San Diego Fleet. Thank you. So he played for the San Diego Fleet. He was signed to the San Diego Fleet. He never actually played for them. He ended up getting signed by an NFL team, and then ended up returning to the NFL, and then ended up in the XFL in 2020, like I said. So definitely very interesting to see his career for sure. To me, he's one of the alt football legends. He's bounced around and he ended up back in the NFL. That's the dream for all these guys.
How many Do you know how many players have come over from the XFL just this past season? I guess to narrow it down.
Okay, so this past season we saw a total of, I believe, 58 USFL players jump over, and then basically we've already seen XFL guys signed who were drafted.
Mm-hmm.
So a big part of what the XFL did this past season is try to tap former NFL talent. Obviously, they want to be like that second league in America, right behind the NFL. So they wanted guys who had been in the league before. They know how to play the game. They're very high level talents. So a lot of them have NFL ties already. So a lot of them ended up back on training camp rosters after these teams ended up eliminated from the playoffs. So I believe the 2020 XFL put something like a total of, I want to say something like 60 players. I could be wrong. Again, I didn't follow the league that closely, as closely as I'm following the XFL and the USFL in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things where, again, these guys are getting opportunities, but a lot of them had ties to these coaching staffs prior. So that was one of the things that we saw this offseason is a lot of these USFL players that were signed by teams that they had previously been with. A good advantage is, or I mean, a good point would be Devin Gray. Devin Gray signed with the Chiefs after playing with the Chiefs previously and then ending up in the USFL to further his career.
I was gonna say on that note, like, what are some other prominent names you can think of? Because I mean, I see every day in the chat, man. It's almost like there's some other name that pops up being associated with one of these alt leagues, either be USFL or the XFL. What are some of the more prominent names you could think of that people might know, that are associated with these guys?
So heading into the 2023 season, as far as the XFL goes, again, it starts February 28th, or
Mm-hmm.
sorry, 28th, 18th, 2 weeks from now. Sorry, kind of twisting my words there. But yeah, in the XFL, there's names like most recently Brett Hundley, former NFL quarterback who's bounced around a little bit. I believe he was a 5th-round pick many years ago, but he's still on the NFL radar. He was actually on an NFL roster recently. He signed with the Vegas Vipers, who also have another alt football league legend who you might know is Luis Perez at quarterback. They have on that roster Martavis Bryant, a former NFL receiver,
Mm-hmm.
well known from his time with the Steelers, former 3rd-round pick. And then you also have Vic Beasley, former 1st-round pick, former NFL All-Pro, really good pass rusher who's going to be rushing from the edge for that defense as well. And then if you wanted to hear big names in terms of coaching, I mean, how about Rod Woodson? How about a Hines Ward? How about a guy like Anthony Becht? NFL players that we all recognize because they're guys who have played during our lifetimes. You know what I mean? There's also names like Joey Porter, Chris Dishman, a bunch of NFL players that are now coaches in the XFL.
Yeah.
When you look at the USFL, they've done a great job at bringing NFL level talent in this offseason. Former 1st-round pick Robert Ndici of the Arizona Cardinals, former 2nd-round pick Breeland Speaks of the Chiefs. They also brought in guys like Davis Cheek, who was most recently on the Carolina Panthers. They got a guy in Cole Kelly who's bounced around the NFL as well. It's been fairly encouraging. Alex Collins, former Seattle Seahawk, Baltimore Ravens running back, is on the roster. Former 1st-round pick Reuben Foster, thank you, Michael, who signed with the Pittsburgh Maulers. So it's very interesting to see all these different big name players landing in these leagues because they are the type of players that are legitimizing them to fans. So, these are the guys that fans want to see how they do.
Yep. Because I mean, and there could be a multitude of reasons a player isn't in the NFL. It's not necessarily talent all the time. And I mean, especially at your positions, your running backs, your wide receivers, your cornerbacks, there's a million of those guys out there. You know what I'm saying? And like sometimes, numbers just don't work for players. But I think the coolest thing about them coming to these alt leagues is the fact that they're bringing the talent level up. Like now it's not just, and it never was just guys coming off the street, it was always talented athletes, but now, it's talented athletes that have actually been there at that next level, and they're going to bring that same intensity, and that's only going to bring up players around them and coaches around them. And I think it's going to be interesting. So you said the XFL starts February 18th. That's on Fox, right?
No, actually, vice versa. The XFL is on ESPN,
Okay.
USFL is on Fox.
Okay. And what days are the games on? Do they have
Uh,
like set days?
Both leagues are primarily Saturday, Sunday. They do have some exceptions. I think the XFL is playing some Thursday games as well, but it's primarily Saturday and Sunday. So I mean, basically the way they're working these leagues is a week after the Super Bowl, the XFL kicks off, and then the XFL will run all the way up to I think late March. I had previously said May. That's my mistake. It's March. So there's actually a couple players that you want to watch for. One of them being Harrison Frost. He's a quarterback who's technically still NFL draft eligible. So the way the XFL works timing wise, he's going to go to this league, be a professional football player before he ever steps foot on an NFL roster. So it's kind of interesting for timing wise how it's working for him. And there's a linebacker. His name's escaping me at the moment, who's also NFL draft eligible for 2023. So kind of an interesting case study for those guys. And then the USFL ends up being basically right after the draft. Okay, so maybe I was correct to begin with. I thought it was March, my mistake. But anyway, the USFL starts in April, basically right before the draft would be. And they kind of overlap a little bit with the XFL. So for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks there, we'll have XFL and USFL on TV for Saturdays and Sundays. And then you'll go into the USFL season. And then actually before the USFL season ends, we go into the CFL season right to the NFL season. So it's going to be nonstop outdoor football in 2023. If you're into these alt football leagues, which again, the XFL and the USFL is going to look real familiar to you. You're going to know some of these names that are playing. You're going to understand the rules because they're very similar to NFL. It's not like CFL where, you've got 12 players on the field. You're playing on a 110-yard field that's wider than an NFL field, and only 3 downs is on top of that.
I feel like I saw something a while back. It was like I think it was an article on the XFL that the NFL was potentially looking or I guess using the XFL for like certain like to test out certain rules to see how those affect the game.
I don't know if that's with the 2023 XFL. I believe they did do that in the past with the 2020 XFL and the 2019 AAF.
Okay.
But that's something that the NFL has always done. They've always been very conscious of these other leagues and how they're doing things because obviously these leagues don't have the preconceived notion of how a game should go. So, when you go into the XFL game, you have a little bit more open-mindedness in terms of what the rules are going to be, how they're going to be. So it's going to be very interesting to see exactly how fans interpret the game. So the NFL watches that. If the fans tend to like what they see in terms of the rule changes, then it's very, very likely that the NFL will adapt these rules at some point. One of the rules that I would love to see adapted is the fact that the USFL and the XFL can actually, USFL and CFL, I'm not entirely positive on the XFL, can review roughing the passer penalties. So actually there was a huge play in the USFL North Championship game that actually turned the tide of the game. During the play, a quarterback was called, or a hit was called as roughing the passer. It was reviewed. It was not roughing the passer. The ball was intercepted on the play. The Stars got the ball back and ended up winning the game and going to the championship. So it's one of those situations where the call was called incorrectly. It would have changed the outcome of the game. The USFL officials got it right on the review, and it ended up sending the correct, in my mind, team to the championship.
So you think? So I feel like why is the NFL already not using these leagues as developmental leagues? They could use both of them. Honestly, one could be for your your past year draft picks and one could be for your new year draft picks. I feel like it'd be better to have them in competition and active games, maybe more so in situations than just simulations. Um,
So I think a big reason why there hasn't been an official partnership is because there's no need to. So a big reason um, why they don't need that partnership is because if you looked in the past, the NFL Europe was one of their development leagues that they had set up. Obviously, they poured a lot of money in that project to try and make it work, and ultimately they determined that it did not work. So instead of investing all the time and money and effort into making these leagues work, why not let somebody else invest the time, money, and effort in making the league work, and then you just cherry pick the best players from both leagues? Because
that
that's
is true.
basically essentially what the NFL has been doing. If you looked at it, the best players or a group of the best players from the USFL were re-signed or signed by NFL rosters for the first time. In fact, there were some success stories too. So, some of the guys that weren't originally on the NFL radar got to the NFL because of the USFL. A guy like Cavante Turpin was able to rehab his image in alternative football leagues and then go back or get on the NFL radar where he should have been in the first place. Another guy, Jeremiah Farms. He was a Power 5 college guy, and then he went into a situation where he was not on an NFL radar. He went and played some arena ball. He ended up coming to the USFL. He played one season in the USFL, and now he's on the Patriots roster and stayed there all 2022. So, these leagues, yes, they are standalone leagues that are not necessarily looking to develop NFL talent for them because obviously they want to keep their best players. But the reality of it is that all the best players eventually are going to funnel to the NFL. That's where all the money's at. None of these leagues are going to be able to compete with the millions that they spend on players in the NFL. But at the same time, if you continue to see XFL players, USFL players go to the NFL and become stars, aka Cavante Turpin, you're going to legitimize these leagues because of what these players are doing versus the most elite level talent in the world, quite frankly.
Yeah. And it's 2023, man. I mean, millions can come from any avenue when you have a brand. And I feel like a lot of these players are starting more so to focus on, well, a lot of people in general are just focusing on their brand because that's what it really comes down to, unless, until you get set up with that, that NFL check. And even then, we see that's still not, evidently, I guess, not enough to keep keep it up. So really, I mean, like you said, as these players start getting in, and then it just adds on too, because the players that are getting in are like, they're making connections for other players that may not have those connections. Basically what I'm getting out of it is it's eliminating the Uncle Ricos of the world. Like, no longer can guys sit around and say, you know what, I should be in there playing. It's like, oh yeah, well, there's at least 20 places, you can go try out right now. And then with the USFL, it was the USFL. Wasn't there a change? Didn't they add like two new play sites or something like that?
It was actually 3. So, yes, that was a big piece of news for the USFL this offseason. They originally played all their games in Birmingham, which was a big reason why fans didn't like watching the game last season. Is basically, if it wasn't a Stallions game, there weren't a whole lot of fans in the stands. Now, I'm a football nerd. I'm going to watch football whether there's fans in the stands or not. I don't care, especially if it's good football, which it was. So I watched every game. I can tell you, with great certainty that I think the attendance is going to dramatically improve now that they have 4 host cities instead of 1. One thing that's a great point that actually my colleague at USFL News Hub made was the fact that you're stressing one city. You're basically asking them to support 8 football teams, a total of something like 40 games in the regular season, another 2 postseason games, and a championship game that they probably wanted in their city went to Canton. So, I mean, not only are they getting like all the regular season games and not necessarily getting to reap the benefits of having the championship run that their team had, but it was one of those situations where they wanted to support their team. They had a hometown team right there. So the fans showed up for those games, and then the diehard alt league fans probably stuck around for the other games, but that was really all it was. And that's the thing is, part of the reason why they wanted to go to multiple hubs is they wanted to be able to tap multiple different markets and be able to get more fans in the stands. So we see them go to Detroit, which they have the Michigan Panthers. So now they have another home team there. They relocated the Tampa Bay Bandits to Memphis, and now they're the Memphis Showboats, which were another original USFL team.
Okay.
But now they're playing home games in Memphis. And then you also have the championship city last year, Canton, Ohio, adopting 2 teams, and Pittsburgh and New Jersey will play in Canton. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see how these different cities receive all the teams. But I think with each city only supporting 2 teams worth of games, of home games anyway, I think it'll be a lot easier and a lot better in terms of attendance to expect fans to be there. Because honestly, asking one city to support that many games was too much. I mean, we're talking about Birmingham, Alabama, and I mean nothing bad about the city itself, but it's not a tourist trap. We're not talking about a Miami where you're going to attract people there regardless of what is going on with the football world, and maybe you attract some fans into the game because it's only $10 to attend. Now you're in 4 different markets. They're craving football, specifically Detroit, who the Lions were pretty good this season. So maybe some of that goodwill carries over into the offseason. And hey, we got Michigan Panthers football here now. Let's go support our team.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's basically what the USFL is banking on.
Yeah, I mean, heck, even high school teams travel around to different locations, Pop Warner
Exactly.
teams are usually the only ones that stay in the same location. So I can see that too. And I mean, I'd say me personally as a fan, I don't know. It's just I want to see these different locations too, these different stadiums, the different energy feel from them. So yeah, I definitely feel like it should hopefully have that exact appeal where it does draw on more fans, and eventually we see them branch out to more cities and bring a team back to Denver. That would be nice to have a team here to go and see. Speaking of that, I mean, is there a team out on the West?
The closest team that we've got currently in the XFL or the USFL would be the Vegas Vipers. They're obviously playing out of Las Vegas. They're playing at I'm blanking the name at the current moment, but Cashman Field, right off the strip. So it's definitely a place where if you wanted to go catch an XFL game, it's not that far away. It's a 2-hour flight from Colorado. So, I mean, if you're a fan of football right now and you're in Colorado and you want to go catch a cheap, game, go, maybe gamble for a weekend as well, fly out to Vegas. It's something that me and my cousin and my brother have talked about. They're not necessarily all football fans, but they would go for the entertainment that's in Vegas, and then at the same time, they'll go catch a football game because it's something I want to do. So, maybe we get fans that way because Vegas is kind of a tourist trap. And, there are going to be people there and be like, hey, look at this. There's a professional football game going down for a league I've never really heard of. Or, maybe I watched the 2001 version of the XFL, but didn't know that it came back in 2020 and 2023.
Yep.
So it's one of those things where it'll be very interesting to see. Again, you don't really know how some of these cities are going to receive the teams. I think the XFL did a great job of picking markets. I think the USFL is taking a very conservative approach, and they're doing it in a manner that they want to be around long term, because they understand that what happens now in season 1 doesn't necessarily dictate what happens in the future in season 5 and season 10 and season 15 is what they're hoping. Everybody I talk to in the USFL, they're not talking about now. They're not talking about today. They're talking about the future of football, the future of the league, and where they can go with it, which is one of those things that I think is important because, it's been a long time. In fact, I think it's been almost a decade since spring football league players at the outdoor level have been able to build on a coaching staff from one year to the next.
Yeah, and I think they benefit as well too from the day and age we live in. Just technology, the fact that you can just sit in your living room and you can catch a game like just chilling around. You can watch it on your phone, quite easily, as opposed to in years past when they try to come out and compete against, major television networks, or maybe come on a network at a time where no one's even home, like
Yeah,
a
exactly.
Saturday afternoon is kind of, if you're home watching football, you're probably watching college football, and it's springtime, you're probably watching, March Madness or something of that nature,
Exactly.
or
And
the NBA.
that's a big thing that they're competing with, isn't they're not necessarily competing with other football leagues or other professional football leagues, but they're competing
Mm-hmm.
with college sports. They're competing with this, that, the other, whatever the TV is, drawing people in with these days. So
Yeah.
it's
And I mean,
definitely interesting.
it's totally college sports, man, for sure. Like, not even for viewers, for players too, though. That's the thing. Like, now with the NIL, like, um, even your smaller schools, are able to pay their players, maybe 30, 40,000, not necessarily pay them, but, able to come up with a scholarship or a deal, a marketing contract for them, for, a few tens of thousands a year, as well as a degree. So,
Yeah.
I imagine, the XFL and USFL, have to kind of, for the most part, compete with that. I feel like some of their players are probably, past their college days, or no, they're not going to college, but I think that's definitely something, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something we saw the USFL implement last season that kind of helped guys finish their degrees, because you do see a lot of guys leave college early to go to the NFL, and then maybe it doesn't pan out and they don't have a degree, they don't have an NFL paycheck. They're in a situation where they need to find an alternative. So, they go to the USFL, it helps them finish their degree and find another career outside of football, which is important. Then they build wealth outside of the league and start building that brand that you talked about earlier. And Michael is actually a prominent supporter of these USFL, XFL leagues, because let's look at this logically. How many practice squad names, or I mean, how many practice squad players can you name right now on any team? 5, maybe total throughout the entire league?
Man, I can't name none.
Okay, so with that in mind, granted, you've heard me talk about some USFL players, some XFL players, but I would imagine you could name 5 XFL, USFL players off the top of your head. I mean, just based on guys that have been over there in the NFL at one point or another. So
Hmm.
rather than go sit on a practice squad where nobody's ever going to see you play again, or nobody will see you play during the NFL season, why not go to the XFL? Why not go to the USFL? Why not build a name for yourself, or keep yourself relevant if you're an NFL name? And then you build a brand. You put yourself in front of eyes. You tell them, every time you're on camera, you're telling the fans, hey, go get my merch that I produce, or whatever it may be. And there's a lot of guys in the indoor football league that have understood this and then gone on to create brands for themselves and made a lot more money than what the league ever paid them. And that's the thing, is that it's the guys that are smart and sees the opportunities for what they are, rather than look at where they aren't, that succeed in life. And quite frankly, that's what the XFL and the USFL is providing, or the indoor football league, or the NAL, or the
Hmm.
CIF, or all these different leagues that we cover on this network. Because at the end of the day, they're providing opportunities for guys that are still determined to play football. It may not pay them millions of dollars, but at the end of the day, it's putting them in front of the right eyes to potentially move up someday. Like, the Tryon Evans, who's just on the show, or multiple other guys who have been on the show that moved their way up from the indoor football leagues to the USFL and the XFL.
Hmm.
We talked about it briefly off camera, but indoor football, you're still probably working a job. XFL, USFL, you might not have to. You might not have to. You're making $5,750 a week, or $5,750 a week in the USFL,
Hmm.
including a $400 stipend for housing. So I mean, you're getting paid more than a livable wage for 4 months of your time, and then what you do the rest of the year is up to you. There's people that live off 50, 60 grand a year, so it can be done. You're not going to live rich by any stretch, but at the same time, how many people can say they make 50, 60 grand in a 4-month stretch of time, and then have another 8 months of the year to create more wealth for themselves.
Exactly. And I imagine if they're that dedicated, to their craft, they would probably be equally as dedicated to, their brand themselves as well. And I mean, that's really all it is, man. You build that up, you can live comfortably. You build up your followers, you keep it going, like, you know, and a lot of them do it for the love too. I imagine, like both sides kind of have their appeal, in the NFL, on the practice squad, you have access to, top of the line facilities, top of the line people at the top of their craft, for, any question or any help with anything you may need. Um, how much do you know how much they make on practice squads?
Yeah, so on average, I think the league is like $12,000 a week per practice squad. So obviously, there's still a big gap between XFL and USFL and practice squads in the NFL. But you also have to consider that XFL and the USFL, you can go earn this money in the off season, turn around and end up on a practice squad for the season and still collect both checks. So that's another possibility for a lot of these guys as well. We saw a lot of that this season. A lot of USFL players that, played the full USFL season and then went to the NFL, maybe didn't necessarily land on an active roster and play in a game, but they were on the practice squad all season. So they were collecting $12,000 a week for 18 weeks after already making 60 grand, or 50 grand in the USFL last season. So, that's life-changing money. Like I understand that a lot of people out there, you might be watching this and you make 6 figures a year. Congratulations, good for you. Not all of us do. So,
Right.
I mean, at the end of the day, these guys are setting themselves up for the future because, $200,000 in a year, what can you do with that money? Where are you investing that money outside of football? Because a lot of these guys take that and they open companies, or they, like you said, they create a brand, they start merch, they do this, they do that, and they make that money work for them, and then they're setting themselves up for generational wealth. And it's kind of funny that, we're having this conversation because not too long ago I saw one of my good buddies, Chris Barrett, spoke about the fact that XFL can set you up for generational wealth. And a lot of players jumped in, or a lot of people jumped in and said 60 grand isn't generational wealth. But what they weren't factoring in is the amount of time you're making that money in. If you're making 60 grand, in Chris's particular spot, he's got a remote job. So he's got some, hours that he can work there where when he's not at practice. So not only is he making that 60K at, the XFL, if he makes it into the XFL, but he's also making money from his job. And then in the 8 months out of the year that he can still create income, he's doing that as well. So, I mean, that's what the people are missing here, is that a lot of people aren't understanding that the opportunity a lot of times is worth more than what the paycheck might be in the beginning there.
Well, I mean, not even just on the player side of the house, you have the coach side of the house too. You mentioned a lot of names from former players that are coaches in these leagues now, and it's opened up those avenues as well. Now not everyone's having to fight for a spot as a developmental coach or a scout team coach on an NFL roster. They can go and get that, that OC, that DC, that that offensive line coach experience, that head coach experience. They can get the experience of leading a team through a season, and hopefully potentially we see it, kind of open up more candidates, for the NFL in that, right? Because I mean, this year, there was kind of a small pool of coaches to pull from, NFL or college wise, so I'm anxious to see that this opens up more candidates towards that too.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because actually I think the XFL did a great job of getting guys that have NFL coaching backgrounds. So Rod Woodson, a lot of people don't know this, he actually coached with the Broncos for a while.
Really?
He coached with the Raiders for a little while, and he's never really stuck at any one position for a length of time. But now he gets an opportunity to showcase what he could do as a head coach at the professional level. And if you tell me that that's not going to garner interest from teams that may have looked at him for a coordinator position or a position coach position at the NFL, you're going to have a hard time convincing me of that. And then
Yep.
Hines Ward Hines Ward just 2 seasons ago was interviewing for NFL head coaching positions, but a big knock on him was what? His lack of experience in coaching. So what did he do? He goes to the XFL. He gets a head coaching position. You think I have a lack of experience? Here's what I can do as a head coach. I will literally put it on film for you.
Yep.
So that cannot be undersold. In fact, a couple seasons ago, well, probably about 10 seasons ago, I'd have to do the math, but a coach, Mark Trestman, was hired by the Bears a few years ago. You know what I mean? And like he was touted as an offensive mind because of some stints as an offensive coordinator in the NFL. But what a lot of people don't understand or don't know about him is he's a former CFL head coach. So before he ever came to the NFL as a head coach, he was a CFL head coach.
Nice.
So, you know, this path has been paved before. It's just a matter of legitimizing the leagues, and the CFL's been around long enough to legitimize itself, and it's just a matter of the XFL or the USFL getting to that point in terms of coaching.
That is true. One thing I do hope though is that they don't just go chasing NFL, NFL players or coaches, and they really, really do make their main emphasis to develop and bring up their own players and coaches that get promoted to that level. And
Absolutely.
I think that'll do good for sure. Once we start seeing, stars, like the cornerback you mentioned, once we start seeing players like that, and then it's like, oh, well, damn, like, okay, well, they did that, they developed him, like, all right, let's see what else they got.
Exactly.
Then we'll really start seeing traction.
Exactly. And I like this comment right here. Rob H says, in regards to sustainability, NBC paid Fox $200 million to broadcast games for 3 seasons. Fox owns their own media, so only paying their talent to call the games. So the way that all works is Fox is technically a big majority owner of the USFL. So they're not paying for the product to be on their TV channels. They're getting whatever benefit it is from the ad revenue, from all of that. It's just coming straight in as profit, right? Because they own the league. So that $200 million that Rob just spoke about from NBC came straight into Fox and helped them run this league. So basically, Fox and NBC are more or less partners in this whole endeavor to make the USFL successful, because NBC wants that product. They want that live football on their channel, as does Fox. They understand the power that football has over fans, because quite honestly, there's just nothing like it in the sports world. But that also creates a long-term viability for the USFL. So it guarantees at least 3 seasons of USFL play. And then what happens past that is really up to the league and the fans. So, a lot of times you'll hear me say support all spring football, because a lot of this tribalism exists, to steal a word from some of my colleagues at USFL News Hub, where some people are an XFL fan because of 2020. Some people are a USFL fan because they grew up in the 80s and they got to watch the original USFL. Why not just support all these leagues? Why not just have year-round football all the time? Why not be able to watch XFL and then watch XFL and USFL games on the same day? That sounds like an amazing life to me. And then we move on again, CFL, NFL. We have year-round outdoor football. We've got all these indoor leagues. Basically, anytime you want to watch football, it's going to be available there to watch. And to me, I don't see that as a bad situation. So for anybody out there who's supporting the XFL or supporting the USFL but not supporting the other, why? What do you have to lose by supporting the other league? Nothing whatsoever. You just get more football. So let's all kind of join forces in this endeavor and keep all these leagues alive. All we have to do is watch them. All we have to do is, occasionally buy a hat, some merch. I mean, obviously you see right here, I'm doing my part. So,
we got that Shady Sports merch too.
Exactly. Speaking of which, got the beanie on right now.
I know, so I got to get mine from you.
Definitely. Yeah. Speaking of which, so February 18th, if you want to come down, we'll definitely be hanging out for the game. Be watching the first Vegas Vipers versus Arlington Renegade games, 1 p.m. And then also probably Super Bowl as well. We'll have some people over if you want to come kick it.
Okay.
But if there's no more questions or anything, I think a good hour is probably a good cutoff. Oh, Rob popped in. Fox stated they made money last season because of the amount of people watching on TV and companies paying for advertising. I wouldn't doubt that. I wouldn't doubt that. In fact, Mike Mitchell put out a great article detailing the TV viewership numbers by markets last season. So check that out on USFL News Hub. He, based on what he said and based on what I saw in terms of attendance and viewership numbers, I would have no doubt that they made money in year one. And you got to consider once again that Fox isn't paying somebody anything to, broadcast this. At the end of the day, they're getting paid to broadcast their products. So that's something that a lot of TV companies can't say about their shows or whatever is drawing you to their network. It's not producing money outside of ad revenue and your viewership. But this league is. So it's kind of interesting to see that model by the USFL. You got anything else, or you cool wrapping it up?
I think it'd be, he's like you said, an hour is about a good time to wrap it up. I'll probably get on here a little later today and get back on my Broncos rant.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, let me know if you do. I'll definitely make sure to put it out on the website and stuff. And again, anybody who tuned in looking for Brahm Cross, I apologize. There must have been some sort of miscommunication on the actual day that we were supposed to do the interview. So I will touch base with him and I will still try to get him on. I personally think he's an up and comer in the music business. I think he's going to be a name that we see all over the place coming up soon. He's also just a very interesting guy, an athlete that does parkour and also served in the military, much like my co-host here. So definitely was somebody that made a lot of sense to get on Shady Sports.
Yeah, I look forward to that, man. I was ready to talk, but definitely looking forward to it when we do get him on.
Yeah, we'll make it happen. I'm sure it's just a miscommunication. Multiple different time zones, stuff like that. There's always kind of a little bit of mix up here and there occasionally. So one of those things with going live is that you do occasionally deal with stuff like this. So again, sorry if you tuned in looking for Brahm Cross, but instead got a round table.
Hey.
I personally think it was a little bit of fun, kind of discussing all the different topics between NFL, USFL, XFL. So definitely it was cool to sit and chat with you because it's been a little bit.
Yeah. Quick before we go though, February 18th coming up quick. Who should people be looking out for?
Personally, if you're asking my opinion on who's going to win the game, I expect that it's going to be Vegas coming out on top. I have a little bit of dog in this fight. I'm personally rooting for the Vipers, given that they're the closest geographic team to me. But I'm also a Battlehawks fan, so I'd like to see them pick up a victory in week one as well. But personally, I mean, if you're looking at this league, it's going to be very interesting football. There's names across the board that you're going to recognize. So I would encourage you, if you don't have anything going on a Saturday afternoon and you really don't have anything better on TV, catch an XFL game, go catch a USFL game, because really I guarantee you're not going to be disappointed. It's exciting football. They hit hard. It's fast playing football. It's exactly like NFL, except I would actually say that the refs affect the game in a negative manner a little bit less than they do at the NFL. And that's something that I've grown to kind of hate about the NFL, is that they seem to affect the outcome of the games quite often.
It's not as corporate. Can people bet on these leagues? Not to
Absolutely.
get back into questions.
No, you're good. You're good. Absolutely. I actually recently found out that you can bet on multiple different football leagues that I was not aware of. Apparently, Bovada is providing different XFL, USFL parlay bets, as well as indoor leagues as well. I was not aware of this. Recently, a player, Javante Surd, let me know. He was a guest on our Prime Cuts episode. Again, if you are tuning in to catch XFL, USFL, NFL news here, I encourage you take some time to go check out our CIF coverage, our IFL coverage, NAL, all these different leagues, because you're going to be tapping in with the future talent in the USFL, the future talent in the NFL eventually. A lot of these guys work their way up step by step to get where they're going. But definitely going to be an interesting season this year for sure.
Nice. Heck yeah, man. Well, I'm ready for it. Year-round football sounds pretty amazing.
Absolutely. Now I just got to drag you out to watch a couple of these games with me.
Right? Yeah. Definitely, I would love to get out to catch them in person. I think that'd make it much better too. I mean, it's football. What can you not like about it? You know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And hey, USFL, XFL, if you're watching, man, I'm telling you, put a team in Colorado, you won't be disappointed. I mean,
You,
we haven't had a team that we've been able to really support on a widespread level since the early days of the Colorado Crush and the AFL. And they folded in 2009. It's been 13 seasons. Our population has boomed since then. There's tons of more money here now than there ever was before. Now's the time for football to return to the spring in Colorado.
yep. That is
But
very true. We're ready for it. I can tell you that.
absolutely. That's something I'm going to preach until we get a team. So hopefully the AFL is it. They're coming out with 16 teams 2024. So Colorado Crush, hopefully they get a return in 2024.
Whew. Let's hope for that, everyone.
No doubt. All right, buddy. Well, it's been a fun talking to you. I'm glad we finally got you in on some alt football conversation. But I definitely need to go hang out with the fam. And I'll definitely catch your episode later if you do end up turning in.
Yeah, man, definitely. Thank you. It's been fun as well. I didn't think we'd pull an hour out of it. Just felt like once we got going, we got going. So
Absolutely.
So hey, man, have a good day.
You as well. You as well. And thank you, everybody who watched. If you did tune in, hit that like button. If you haven't already, subscribe and tune in for future episodes. Because like I said, we're covering every football league and we're adding sports coverage from other sports as well. Hopefully we can get some basketball, hockey, other sports you guys want to see. So if you have any comments, concerns, suggestions, questions, anything like that, feel free to hit us all up. We're all on social media, so definitely look forward to talking to all you guys. Have a great day.